What if the referendum Labor plans for 2023 on the Indigenous Voice to Parliament does not receive bipartisan support? Should Labor press on with the prospect that it might fail, or wait even longer?
Dean.
Thanks for the question. Rather than speculate about what might happen with the bipartisan support, I think let's just look at what we know now, because that's really important. So what we know now is we've had 15 years of unbroken bipartisanship on the question of recognising Indigenous peoples in the Constitution. That remains today. That bipartisanship remains today. The question has always been, what form should it take? What is the most meaningful form to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples? If we're going to do this, if we're going to take the nation to a referendum to recognise Indigenous peoples in the Constitution, what should it look like? What's meaningful to us? And the Uluru Statement from the Heart very clearly, definitively said, we can't just do symbolism. It's got to have an impact on our communities on the ground. It's got to have a practical impact.
But Dean, the question that the Prime Minister's outlined doesn't go into that. The question just says, do you want a voice? And Parliament will decide the detail. How can you be sure that it's going to meet the intent of the Uluru Statement from the Heart?
I'll finish the rest of my question. I'll come back to that, Stan. So what our mob said is we've got to have a voice. As we've talked about here, as June just very eloquently said, and I'm not going to repeat that because she nailed it, in terms of the need for the voice to make sure that the institutions that are set up in the name of dealing with Indigenous issues, spending money in the name of Indigenous peoples and affairs and communities, are actually doing the right thing and are informed by the voices of our people on the ground. So that's the first thing. So that question of recognition is still there. The bipartisanship is still there. Mob have said it's got to be through a voice. And it's the only practical way that we can meaningfully recognise Indigenous peoples in the Constitution, and so I think that's the important thing there. That recognition, that bipartisanship still sits there. The opposition leader Peter Dutton, in coming in and taking over the opposition leader role, very clearly said at the beginning that he's open to the question, and that he's obviously waiting on the government to progress this issue forward. The other thing that is a very positive sign was the appointment of Julian Lisa as the Shadow Indigenous Affairs Minister. Julian has had a lot of experience on this issue, understands it inside and out, worked with Senator Patrick Dodson, so knows how to work across the aisle on this question in being the co-chair of the Joint Select Committee back in 2018. So the points are there, the data points are there so far to say that there is an opportunity to create bipartisanship, and I really actually hope that give this some time and not shut it down just yet. Give us the opportunity.
Jacinta sitting next to you.
And I mean that in good faith. Yeah. I mean that in good faith, in the sense of we haven't seen the full detail to emerge yet. The Prime Minister put down some
and that's the point. So, sorry, Dean, so I will bring Jacinta in, because that is the point, isn't it? The detail, and if I read Peter Dutton, clearly he's saying, well, I'm waiting to see before there'll be a commitment. Is that the question, the detail?
Well, there's the detail, and there's also, like, I mean, I want to know there are Indigenous Australians that don't agree with it, you know. I want to know whether
across
our Prime Minister...
Across a wide range of political spectrums,
right.
by the way.
I want to know whether our Prime Minister has sat and listened to those people and had those conversations as well. And again, it comes down to this idea of it, like recognition. I think, yeah, you're right. We can all get on board with recognition, but I don't trust a bureaucracy to be enshrined, in our Constitution. And, with all due respect, Linda, ATSIC was corrupt. That's why it was a bipartisan decision to shut it down. So,
I think that's a big statement.
It's true though. It's the truth, and there's a lot of Indigenous organisations that have the responsibility, are government funded to have the responsibility to advance Indigenous Australians. There are many that have gone into administration because of corruption. There's accountability to be had by Indigenous organisations as well. And less bureaucracy as opposed to more bureaucracy is actually is what creates economic independence, the ability to stand on one's 2 feet, and not just entirely based on what identity as an Indigenous person, but simply just as a human being as well.
Can I sort this out?
Oh, okay.
Can I sort this out? The design this is really important. The design of the voice will happen after respectful, extensive consultation with First Nations people and with the Australian community and across the Parliament.
Will it happen after the vote?
No, it will happen
Before the referendum.
Before the legislation, the design of the voice will take place. So it won't be me deciding. That would be so wrong. It won't be the Prime Minister deciding. It'll be people that we consult with and build a consensus with that we will listen to make sure that it is
So the detail of what the voice is, how it is constituted, whether it's elected or how it's elected, its scope of the voice, we will know before. Okay, we will know before it goes to a vote, before you introduce the legislation to set up the referendum.
There will be a lot of information out to the community about what people are voting on. It would be nuts for that not to happen. And the principles, some of the basic information, a lot of the work, as Dean has said, has already been done. There are a number of groups that have stuck with this for 5 years since Uluru.
Linda, I think the Prime Minister was, in his speech and a lot of the comments that I've heard, has been a little bit more vague than that, saying it'll be nothing more or less than a voice. It won't have a veto, but a little bit more vague on what the timeline will be and the detail and the scope of it. But you are saying we will know this before it goes to a referendum.
There will be ample information out to the community to know what people are voting on. It would be nuts.
Would you go it alone if there's not bipartisanship?
Well, I'll come to that. But the goal is that we want to try and build consensus across the Parliament. I think it would be a wonderful piece of leadership if there was bipartisanship. And I am so happy to see that Peter Dutton is open to this. David Littleproud is open to this. And the Australian people are ready. You are ready. We saw that today. We wouldn't be embarking on this exercise if there wasn't a belief that the tide is with us.
Can I ask?
And like the Prime Minister said, like the Prime Minister said, if not now, when?
Can I ask Yiŋiya to come in on that? Yiŋiya, are your people ready? You said before there's not enough consultation and not enough awareness. Are people ready to say yes or no to go to a vote?
My people here in the East Arnhem Land and in the Yolŋu region, we have been ready for a long time. We have been ready for a long time because I can talk about Stan, the example of 1988 Baranga petition. Now, there were 2 land councils, the Central and the Northern Land Council, that brought all our elders from both centre and from the east. Mulka, Walal? Yeah. They all came and were there. We were prepared. We were ready for the recognition of Indigenous culture, of our Indigenous identity to go. We were all ready, but the government wasn't ready. All there was promises about there will be treaty. There will be a treaty. And that echoes all the way along and nothing ever happened.
How much trust is there? You have were there when Bob Hawke promised there would be a treaty. And as you've said, and as Yothu Yindi said, promises can disappear like writing in the sand.
Yes, yes.
How much trust is there?
Well, at that time, it was a new promise that we got. There will be a treaty, and everybody was happy. But as time went on, we waited and waited and waited. And now it became like a writing in the sand. And we're still waiting for promises. We're still waiting for there will be treaty. There will be treaty. And now it's getting complicated, being divided into different areas. Of course, that's okay. But I'm sure, and I know very well about people in Eastern Arnhem Land, our people, we had treaties before. And we are ready for this one. If that referendum was called, now we would be gathering our people and we would go for it as soon as we could.